So let's have a look how to analyze fiction. So the features of a narrative text. The commonest form of fiction as a genre is a novel. The novel depicts imaginary events and characters. They are representative of real life. It is written in prose rather than verse. It is a narrative, so it narrates a story. It has characters, actions, and a plot. It involves people who act in a context ruled by chronology, so time, and cause and effect relationship. It involves an investigation of an issue of human significance whose complexity requires a certain length. So the story or the plot involves a time, a place, and complex slices of life. There's a difference between the story and the plot. A narrative text is made up of the story. The story is the sequence of events normally presented in chronological order. But the author can combine these events in different ways using flashbacks, anticipation of events, or by omitting details of the story. So this sequence of events is the plot. So a story can start from the end and going back into time. The pattern the author imposes on the action of the novel generally includes four stages: introduction of the situation, breakdown of the initial situation, development of the story to the climax, and where the initial situation can be restored or changed. The setting is the place and the time of the story. The place setting can be interior or exterior. For example, in Robinson Crusoe, the setting deals with the description of the landscape, interiors, and objects. Time setting usually refers to the time of the day, the season, the year. Social historical factors are also important because you have to analyze a story according to a particular historical context. The narrators change according to the historical context, to the philosophical context. The so-called cinematic novelists of the 19th century anticipated the cinema. We are not going to study this now, but so I'm going to skip it, okay, just not to make you confusion. I'm going to skip this, but anyway, the cinematic technique usually starts from the background, so you've got a wide panoramic aerial views with the aim of introducing a particular an action. But again, I'm going to skip this. Now let's consider different kinds of narrators. The first person narrator employs the I mode. He can coincide with the author or a character. For example, Robinson Crusoe is the narrator and the protagonist of the story. The choice of this narrator can have the following functions: to bring the reader close to the mind and feelings of the narrator, to convey an impression of reality, to restrict the reader's view. So if the narrator is a first-person narrator, the reader's view, the reader's opinion is restricted because we hear only one point of view. We don't have other characters speaking or narrating. The third-person narrator knows everything about the actions and the character's thought and intention. He or she is also called omniscient. This means that he knows everything. The omniscient narrator can be obtrusive when he or she addresses the reader directly, making personal remarks or providing a comment on the society of the time or some of the characters of the story. So, for example, in Tom Jones, the narrator, Fielding, addresses to us, to the reader. Unobtrusive when he or she is detached and objective and does not interfere with the story. He doesn't use adjectives to comment. Narrative modes and the point of view are extremely important because they influence the reader, so you must be aware of this. The author chooses the way to tell his story as a dialogue, description, or narration. These modes are usually interwoven, but the point of view is the angles from which the scene is described and the story told. It is influenced by the kind of narrator. For example, if we've got dialogue, the characters speak for themselves. So we can make up our mind, we can make up our opinion on them. While if you read a description saying, well, the girl was beautiful, sunny, always smiling, we are influenced by the adjective used by the writer. The characters. The presentation of a character can be direct through the description which the writer makes of his her personality, or indirect when the reader has to infer the features of the character from his reaction and behavior. I'm going to explain this. When you've got a dialogue, the three characters speak in two, three, whatever. So you have to understand their personality, their features of the character. While if you've got narration, description, that is a direct. It may be a paradox actually, because a direct presentation is when the characters speak, indirect is when the writer narrates. But actually it is the opposite. It is a direct presentation because the writer describes them. It is indirect when you read dialogues. And so it is a bit more demanding to understand the personality of the character, but it is more challenging because the reader is more involved. So there are, for example, we can say very simply, easy novels, more difficult novels. Why? Well, easy novels are when you read the story of, for example, Little Red Riding Hood, Cappuccetto Rosso. There is a narrator telling the story of a girl going to her grandmother, taking some food, meeting a wolf, disobeying her mom, etc., etc., etc. So that is direct. You got the story. When you read a novel from the 20th century, you read the thoughts of a character. You are not helped by the narration or the interference of the writer. Now it's difficult to understand. When we are going to meet, I'm going to explain it much better. There can be major and minor characters depending on the role in the story. The characters can be round when they change their personality as the narration develops and can influence the plot. They change, for example, Tom Jones is a round character because at the beginning of the story he's very naive, a bit stupid, he believes everything. He takes silly decision, but in the end he's a more mature boy. Flat when they do not change throughout the story. They are the so-called stereotypes. The theme is the message, is the ideas the author tries to convey by means of the story. It contains the message whose interpretation leads to an understanding of the meaning of the text. And you have to be very careful in this because sometimes students get puzzled. Okay, so this is just a very short explanation and I hope to meet you in video conferenza and to clarify everything.